quite a major forecast you're making about Europe, which is doing really lagging behind everywhere. And you're saying time for Europe to bounce back. That since 2011, that's more than 12, 13 years, Europe has lagged behind the US. They were going together up till then, and then there was a gap. And you're saying now Europe is going to bounce back, and you've given positives for Europe. Maybe you could actually run us through each of these positives.
Yeah, so I think that people are very bearish on Europe, that everyone talks very negative about Europe, and rightly so. You go to Europe, you look at the European infrastructure, it's all very crummy. But my point is that expectations are very low out of Europe today, and Europe has already had a serious downturn.
So first thing you say that Europe's savings are much higher than the US.
Yeah, so there are a list of reasons that I've given as to why potentially Europe could surprise on the upside.
Maybe you could go through that list with us.
So one I said is that the savings rate, like as you know, lots of governments gave massive amounts of stimulus. In America, the consumer got the stimulus and has gone and virtually spent all of it.
Right.
In Europe's case, they have saved a lot of it, partly because of the fact that they are much more cautious. So they have a much bigger savings net.
And you've also said that that's hope for the future, that Europe's inflation has declined more than the US. The inflation is much more under control.
Yeah, no, but in terms, apart from being under control, it's the fact that it's fallen from very high levels. So they suffered enormously from the Ukrainian energy crisis. But now that the energy crisis is in the rear view window, and so now things are looking a bit better for consumers because inflation rates have dropped so sharply in Europe.
Then Europe's wage growth is rising.
Yeah, so in terms of the factors that because of the purchasing power has improved because of the decline in inflation, so that's what's happening. And then the last point I mentioned is interest rates.
Yeah, that's a very interesting one.
That in Europe a lot of
has
people
more flexible interest rates.
Taken floating exchange rate, so that's the structure of that market.
Yeah.
So they suffered the shock much more.
Already absorbed it.
At least part of it compared to America. So these are some of the reasons why I think Europe has a chance of surprising on the upside. Now remember that
and
Europe
the upside you're saying because you're saying that there's very low expectations from Europe.
Yeah.
That's your final point.
Yeah, because even now when I say this, I'm sure I'll get a lot of pushback saying, how can you be even marginally positive on Europe? Don't you see what's happening on the ground there and how grim things are? And every time people have spoken something positive about Europe, it's never worked out because, as you showed, that for the last 10 to 15 years, Europe has consistently disappointed.
Right. A friend of mine bought some hotel in Greece 10 years ago, and it was in disaster. Now Greece is the best, fastest growing economy, or the best economy in Europe.
Yeah, that's one of the things that we spoke about last year as well, that there are bright spots even within Europe.
Right.
So I know that we speak about Europe as just like we speak about India as a one entity, but there are very broad differences. Like in India, there are major differences between how the southern states are doing versus, let's say, the other states of India. In Europe, there's a big difference between some of the Eastern European states or some of the countries like
Greece. So what Greece does today, Europe does tomorrow. So now it's doing better, everybody will catch up.
Yeah, because Greece remember like a country that when we started this show was the basket case of the world.
Now look at it, the best performing economy.